Welcome back everyone to J-Face Games. Today we're continuing with this position concept, and I'm going to do more spitballing today. There were some great comments that kind of came up recently, and one of them kind of asked the question about, like, how tactical do you really need an RPG to be, right? Meaning that can you just have advantage, disadvantage, plus GM ruling, right? And I think that there's a lot of games that are very good at this, right? They just do advantage, disadvantage, plus the GM ruling, and in essence, you don't need to build any other tactics into the game, like flanking and position sense and all this kind of stuff, right? And I think there's some games that do that really well. And then you have games like maybe ICRPG that does like easy or hard, which just gives you a +3 or -3, but there's still other tactics into it, but they try to decrease the cognitive load, I guess you could say, of the simulation of tactics, right? But then you have the games that are very tactical. You have games like Pathfinder and Savage Worlds and 4E Dungeons and Dragons. And I think that I think you could still have room within those games to make role-playing. And I like tactics. Now, granted, I agree that I don't want tactics to be everything, right? But I like them. So let me give you an example of what Savage Worlds. This was someone created this, which is in essence, there's a lot going on here, but what in essence someone did was they took Savage Worlds and they took all of the actions you can do and they created this sort of like survival guide, this unofficial combat survival guide, right? Which is pretty much like situations, right? So you have these main 3 situations, just these 3 right here, which are you can't hit the target, you can't damage the target enough, and you're going to die soon if you keep standing there, right? Those are like the 3 things they said. And then depending on that, there might be different reasons why you can't hit the target. He's too high of a parry, or too many penalties for a ranged attack, so you can't actually shoot him. There's a lot of ranged in Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is definitely a game where it's based more on ranged attacks first, and then the melee's still fun, but the ranged attack's definitely very flushed out. Or one of the motives above, or both, right? And then it gives you these sort of like descriptors to give you an idea of what that looks like, or what might be going on. Your team outnumbers the foe, so that's one of the things you can do. So you can try and gang up on them, and then this is how you do it. Or you can try and push them over, you can try and do a wild attack, you can try and etc. So it's really cool because then when you get to this area, this is well then try to do this, and here's the actual like mechanics of the game. So you can try and gang up, push, knock them prone, wild attack them, ranged attack, aim, switch to melee attacks from ranged, try and support your ally, test to make them vulnerable, grapple, blah, 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 blah. And then down here are, in essence, this is it in terms of the different conditions that can be placed on an enemy, right? They can be bound, entangled, distracted, another entangled, prone, shaken, stunned, vulnerable, right? And so you're trying to figure out how can I get these on the foe in order to get better at them. Now, you might look at this and say, well, that doesn't seem fun because now it's a solved problem, right? Where it's like, I'm just following a script in order to do my turn, right? Oh, if I'm in this sort of situation, I do this. If I'm in this sort of situation, I do this. And I get that. I can understand that. They do add, so there are 2 things in here. For instance, when you see this word test is actually like you're making a skill check of some sort. So in those scenarios, you're actually there's an RP action of sorts. You're using a test of some sort of, whatever you've come up for your RP to try and do to the enemy in order to put some sort of condition on them, either distract them or make them vulnerable. So there's a little bit of RP in there. But I get it. I get the idea that, oh, okay, maybe this is a solved puzzle, but then it's the DM's, in this sort of game, the DM's job would then to make encounters where you're having to make a decision of, yes, I can't hit this one and I can't damage that one. Where am I going? What am I doing? Where do we need to go? How do I help my teammates? How do I, etc. But to people's points in the comments, is that an RPG or is that too tactical? Are you now just playing a tacticals minigame? Totally get that. Totally respect that. And so now I'm going to go in the realm of maybe I'm going to over-tactic it, and then walk it back. I'm going to try and create a game that seems fun to me and then walk it back if necessary if it's gotten a little too much. So one of the cool things that came from the comment section was we've already talked about position actions, and those were mentioned completely in the last video, what the position actions are. In essence, it's either where you begin, where you end up, right? That there's a different bonus for either ending in a certain range or beginning in a certain range. Okay. Then I like the topic of action, we'll say attack type. Well, let's do this. We'll say there are actions you can take, and those actions I listed above already, which are kind of like these, right? You're gonna choose one of these actions. We're just gonna copy and paste this over here. We're gonna get rid of move, because I think that's gonna be inherent in a second. I think the rest of these are good. Suppression based on position, so this is a position specific. Position action free. Okay, I don't need that there. All right, so you've got take one of these. So let's say take one of each, right? And so the take one of each would be, kind of, right? Take one of each would be take a position action and then take one of these actions, right? Now within these, you could have, I was talking to Shane about this, and I thought that he brought up a good concept where in essence you could have normal, offensive, you could have overly offensive, defensive, overly defensive, right? And so we'll get rid of defense dodge here. The idea being here that normal, we'll just say offensive, but in essence, this is like your standard action in a game, right? Where it's just your normal attack. It's a normal attack, right? Overly offensive might be something like you are adding movement, plus you have less defense, or maybe additional attacks. Probably not. And then you have defensive, which is, in essence, you are additional movement plus trying to create space plus less offensive plus increased defense, right? So this is the idea of I'm trying to be dodgy, right? Like this type of defense is like dodging, right? And then overly defensive would be like stalwart or sort of like holding my ground. So this is no movement plus very defensive, right? So these are just different sort of flavors. And then you could have your standard readying action, and you have your then we'll talk about RP actions later, and then you have these special actions. So we can even move suppression here because it's not even a choice, right? Suppression is going to be one of these sort of options. So now you have this concept of I only have to choose one of two things. I would choose two things. I'm going to choose a position action, and then I'm going to choose what I'm going to do with my action, and my action could be overly offensive, overly defensive, etc., or it could delay, and that's it, right? And so that might be nice and tactical, but also, simplistic, or not simplistic, but manageable. And then what about movement? Well, movement, we just make it like ICRPG or Quest, where the idea is like, if it's close, you can get to it. Nearby, you can get to it and attack. I think that in ICRPG, I have the book here. In ICRPG, I think that it's like, if it's close, you just can attack it. If it's nearby, you can get there and you can attack it. And if it's far, you can just get to it. So we'll have to think about this in terms of what does this mean for our system. Like, you can automatically move. Now granted, you still have, if engaged, you might elicit attack of opportunity, right? So there still might be conditions as though I'm not just going to run away. I'm not going to just get this automatic movement. But in essence, it's like I'm either going to go here or I'm going to stay here. And if I stay here, then I'm using RP actions in order to try and disengage and engage and etc. Right? Or I'm not using RP action. I'm using skill checks, right? Skill checks to kind of move within some of the ones that are like super close, right? Like close, engaged, nearby. Maybe I'm just having to do a couple skill checks in order. So now it's giving me some reason to have a good, background skill check. So I like that. I like this concept here. I'd be curious what you guys think, because it's putting a lot more onus on this sort of like action and position action. And the position actions were already listed above. That is sort of this thing right here. I'll copy that and we'll move it down here. So now just to clean this up and kind of bring it all together a little bit more. So now you have this. You have this take one action. It's either you're gonna take one of each action, a position action and an action, right? And then movements are just a separate concept here. So now these might have to be played with, and these might have to be played with, right? The last thing I was thinking about, good ideas come in the shower, and I was just taking a shower. And so the other idea I was thinking about is, what if you think about something like this, where it's very grid-based, and I'm probably going to go through what is it they're trying to get away from these and look at their conditions, and I'm probably going to take some influence from this because there's stuff in there that I really love. And what I'll have to think about is, but to still appease those individuals that don't want the tactical, it would be very interesting to see something like, if you're looking at this, whoops, that's the wrong grid. If you're looking at this and it's like, here's the situation. This is what you're trying to do. This is how you do it with actual mechanics. But then you have another row that's like, wing it, right? Where in essence, you can use an RP action to still technically accomplish anything you want, right? You could do a skill action to still accomplish anything you want, right? But how that DC works and how you roll for that might be incredibly hard, right? Or incredibly weird or just different. But the idea that, yes, you can still accomplish these tasks you want to do and you don't have to do it in this uberly tactical way, that's there. And the game can be built around using that. But why not allow people to break the rules sometimes and just be like, I'm going to do this. And it's still mechanically somewhat built into the system. So I'd be curious what you guys think about that. Anyways, that's where we're at with this. Shoot me your comments, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking right now.